The Supreme Court has provided a lifeline, at least a temporary one, to Donald Trump's redistricting efforts in his attempts to hold on to the Republican majority in the House of Representatives in next year's elections. On Friday, Justice Samuel Alito blocked a lower court's ruling from earlier this week that barred Texas from using its recently redrawn GOP-friendly congressional map that could net up to 5 additional Republican seats in next year's midterm elections, after a 3-judge panel ruled that the state's new map is likely an unconstitutional racial gerrymander. Texas was the first state to meet Trump's demands to try and add some Republican seats to the board through redistricting efforts. Texas was then followed by states like Missouri and North Carolina. Trump has also been ramping up pressure recently on Indiana Republicans to do the exact same thing, even calling into primary state lawmakers unwilling to get on board with his efforts. A loss in the Supreme Court would, of course, hamper Trump's efforts, especially given that California won a resounding victory at the ballot box earlier this month in its redistricting proposition that also could net Democrats up to an additional 5 seats. According to Punchbowl News, California Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley, whose district is being redrawn, tore into Speaker Johnson this week, saying, quote, "It was a total failure of leadership to let this happen in a way that is going to be bad for our own members, bad for the House, bad for representation across the country." Republican Congressman Kevin Kiley joins us now. Congressman, thank you for joining us this morning. I want to ask you, what exactly did you mean by a failure of leadership? Are you talking about the fact that this redistricting effort appears to be failing, or the initial demand by President Trump to launch this entire thing?
Well, yeah, I think it was totally misguided from the beginning. I've been warning for months that this whole thing was probably going to come out as a wash anyway, but that even if one side or the other could gain a partisan advantage, that certainly isn't a reason to upend district lines in the middle of the decade and start this really new phenomenon of mid-decade gerrymandering. So I've been very clear that I oppose gerrymandering wherever it occurs, whether it's Texas, whether it's California, whether it's Indiana, whether it's Maryland. I think it is bad for democracy when politicians draw their own district lines. It takes power away from voters. And the fact that Speaker Johnson has been unwilling to actually, stand up for protecting our members, protecting our institution, protecting fair representation, I think is very unfortunate. I've been asking him for months now to bring a bill that I've introduced to the floor that would say no mid-decade gerrymandering in any state in the country, and yet he's been unwilling to do that.
Congressman, in that vein, are you hoping that the courts strike down Proposition 50?
Well, it's unclear what the courts are going to do in either of these cases. It should never have come to this. Of course, my preferred outcome is I can continue to represent my beautiful 3rd district as it is and represent all of my constituents, and that our state can continue to have fair district lines. I was against Prop 50 for that reason, but I'm against gerrymandering wherever it occurs. And so, of course, I was against our state going back to it. But the fact that you now have court cases in California and Texas that are challenging these new gerrymandered maps, and people are like, well, what's my district going to be? Where am I going to run? What's our state's congressional representation going to look like going forward? That just adds a whole other element to chaos to this whole thing, which continues now to cascade across the country with state after state after state getting in on the act in this redistricting war, which really has just become mutually assured destruction at this point. If you look at the sort of forecast of how this is all going to play out, most forecasters would say it's probably going to be something like a wash, maybe a modest gain for one party or another. It's just the whole thing is totally pointless.
Well, granted that the chaos actually is cemented and remains unchanged, it seems like District 5 is where you would have the best chance of actually staying in office as an elected Republican. If Tom McClintock decides to run for re-election, would you challenge your fellow Republican?
So I haven't made any decisions about which of the 6 pieces that my district has been chopped into I'm going to go with. It's kind of an impossible dilemma, when you have and I've never heard of anyone having to make a decision like this. For my district, because of this new gerrymandered map, has been all of a sudden sliced 6 different ways in the middle of the decade. And so I can only continue to represent part of my current constituency. So I've not made any decisions about what I'm going to do. I'm having a very deliberative process of talking to folks throughout my district. Our deadline isn't until March, so I'm not really in any rush. But I will tell you this, that sort of the fundamental flaw with gerrymandering is that politicians presuppose that they can dictate election outcomes just by moving lines around on a map. In the last election, I got the second most crossover votes of any person running in a competitive race for Congress across the country, meaning people who voted for Kamala Harris for president but voted me for representative. And that's because I've represented my district in a way that isn't about partisanship, but it's about focusing on protecting the quality of life for the folks that I represent. So that being said, I'm confident that I have a good path to re-election, multiple good paths to re-election, and that we can defeat this Jerry.
Well, when you make that decision, please come on here and let us know when that happens. So I want to get to some other news. President Trump has over and over this week said that Democrats who were in this video, who reminded the military members that they shouldn't comply with illegal orders, he's called them seditious. And Mike Johnson, your speaker, said it was the Democrats who were acting wildly inappropriate by suggesting that military members should disobey unlawful orders from Trump. By post, seditious behavior punishable by death, according to Johnson, Trump was simply defining the crime of sedition, him defending President Trump's seditious attacks there on Democrats. Do you agree with the Speaker of the House on this?
Well, I've said I thought that the comments are wrong, that they're not acceptable. There's no place for that rhetoric. We need to dial down the rhetoric, I think, kind of all around. I didn't like the video either. I think that if you think some sort of order is unconstitutional, the thing to do is to challenge that in a court of law, not to encourage insubordination. But I absolutely didn't like the response to it either. So I think that, it's just another example of how the rhetoric has gotten way too heated. Partisanship has gotten way too extreme in this country.
Congressman, a quick follow on that, though. I mean, the president suggested that these lawmakers should be hanged, suggested the death penalty. I mean, are you okay with that? Do you think that's appropriate behavior for the president of the United States?
No, as I said, I think it's unacceptable.
And then, I want to also ask you about the upcoming election, because that's what we were talking about. But some of your colleagues, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, who just resigned, said that she's resigning, said that part of the resignation was that she was raging against the speaker for refusing to proactively work on a plan to save Americans' health care. I also recently spoke to another one of your Republican colleagues, Don Bacon, who said that he very well thinks that if Republicans don't extend these ACA subsidies and don't have some kind of answer that on healthcare, that Republicans could very possibly repeat the 2018 major losses where Democrats won in a wave. What do you think Republicans need to do before that deadline at the end of the year, where premium hikes could go up on millions of Americans?
Well, I think a good idea would be to pass the bill that I've introduced on this bipartisan bill with Sam Liccardo from California, which would extend these subsidies for 2 years, but would also include reforms to control costs and to fight against fraud and improper payments, such that we're actually paying for this temporary extension to give us the runway that we need in order to address the broader reforms that we need in our healthcare system. And by the way, to the kind of premise of the question, I don't think that's something we should do because of the political consequences. I think it's something that we should do because of the consequences for the people who are going to suffer if we don't take action. We have 22 million Americans who are on the brink of seeing a massive increase in healthcare costs, thousands and thousands of dollars. These are independent contractors. These are small business owners and employees. These are retirees who are not yet eligible for Medicare. And I certainly am not willing to just, let them see this enormous increase in costs, especially in a very high cost of living state like California, because Congress has failed to act.
And Congressman, before we let you go quickly, I would be remiss to let you off the hook on another piece of breaking news that I know a lot of Californians are looking at right now. The Trump administration released their plan on Thursday to open up waters off the coast of California to oil drilling. Do you support offshore drilling in California?
I'm looking at it. I have some concerns about the proposal, in terms of what it's going to do to both our economy and our environment. I do think it's vitally important that we explore new sources of domestic energy production. In California, in particular, we have by far the highest gas prices and highest electricity prices in the country. But we can't do that at the expense of undermining values that are very important to our state. So I'm looking at the specifics that have been proposed, but I certainly